I'm just so excited to welcome you all to our very special April member meetup. I just have to pause for 1 second and while people are coming in and just marvel at the fact that we started the member meetups in April of last year, or maybe the last week of March. And remember, I see faces on here who were there on the first one. We went for 8 weeks, eight Fridays in a row. We were all kind of freaked out. We didn't really know what was going on because of COVID, and we just wanted to connect and kind of help each other, be a source of support. And when things sort of settled down and we pivoted to monthly, which was in June, we started going topic by topic, and it's just been so great. And I think everyone felt, I guess everyone I talked with anecdotally was like, let's just keep doing this. We don't have to have to stop because people have been vaccinated or things have started up again, because we're not really past COVID and a lot of us still can't travel. So we can all connect this way. I'm so delighted to have two amazing guests today joining me and sharing with you for our member meetup. So just a few housekeeping things before we get started. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Debra Prinzing, founder of the Slow Flowers Society. And if you're here as a member, I love you. I'm so grateful for your support and so proud of our community and what we've all accomplished. And if you're not a member and you're here just checking it out, we'd love you to join us. And Karen will put just a link to membership information in the chat box. So I want to introduce Nisha Blancas. Nisha is our social media manager. Anything beautiful you see on Instagram at my Slow Flower Society on Instagram or on Facebook is Nisha's talent and ability to storytell in just a quick image that is always beautiful. And Nisha's going to be grabbing everyone's name in the chat participant box to enter you in a drawing for several giveaways. So if you just have some random thing that like iPhone 2 or whatever, please go in and change the name and identify yourself or your business so Nisha can know who you are. She may actually message you if she's not able to figure out just from a first name. Anything else, Nisha? Oh, thumbs up. Great. And Karen Thornton, our operations manager, is kind of monitoring the chats, and she'll private message you if she sees that you're having trouble with any questions or any technology and try to help you out. So Karen is behind the scenes. Thank you so much, Karen. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two guest speakers. One is Becky Fiesby of Prairie Girl Flowers, and Becky is based in Calgary, Alberta. Hi, Becky. And her cohort is Toby Nelson of Toby Nelson Events and Design, and Toby is based on Whidbey Island outside of Seattle. We call this the Toby and Becky show, or the Becky and Toby show, because the two of them have collaborated in so many cool ways. And what really prompted me to ask them to do a session on sustainable floral design or sustainable floristry is just some emails I've received from newer members who are kind of just learning about this philosophy and really having a lot of questions that are about how to keep your flowers fresh and alive while also avoiding the use of toxic or chemical products, and how to, handle things that may be solutions or fertilizers and that sort of thing that, are safe or not safe to dispose of. So some of them were pretty technical, but I forwarded those questions on to Toby and Becky, and they're going to tackle what they can. And they have a beautiful presentation for us, and there'll be time for questions and answers afterwards. I think I'm going to just quickly introduce them and then turn it over to them. As I mentioned, Becky is the owner of Prairie Girl Flowers. She's also the Slow Flowers Canadian sort of mentor and representative. So if you're here from Canada and you just want to have a friendly face and a responsive person, Becky is available to just chat with you. Becky founded Prairie Girl Flowers in 2018, and she is a passionate gardener florist who creates natural arrangements centered on the vibrant colors and textures that make up life on the prairies where she lives. They take great care in selecting materials for for all the floral designs they do and use as many locally sourced products as possible in an effort to reduce waste and cut back on the use of plants and flowers that need to travel long distances to reach Calgary. Dedicated to the seasonal floral movement and the slow flowers movement, Prairie Girl Flowers loves collaborating with farmers, growers, and creatives in their community. Becky posts a lot on social media about ethical and sustainable floristry, and so that'll weave its way into this presentation. She's also the founder of the Sustainable Flowers Workshop that has happened the last 2 Septembers. She may talk about that. And she is getting a master's degree at Harvard, and I'm going to let her tell us what that actually is in, but it's pretty impressive. Toby is a longtime friend from here in the Seattle market and a big influencer on me. We included her in our Slow Flowers Heroes chapter in the book Slow Flowers Journal that came out last year. Toby owns Toby Nelson Events and Design, and she has managed countless weddings and produced countless weddings, but all while preaching sustainability and educating both her clients and her peers about sustainable practices. Toby's the founder of the Whidbey Flower Workshop, which occurred for 3 years in a row until COVID put a pause on it. Toby might have to tell us a little bit more about that. And she has a second blog, I guess, website on sustainable floral design, which we'll put the link in the chat. So I'm going to just stop talking and welcome you both and let you start your presentation. And how long roughly do you think you'll go? Maybe 30 minutes or so?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then we'll have some time for Q&A after that. And this is being recorded, so you'll all be able to go back and watch the slides if you didn't get the details that you want as they move through. So Becky and Toby, thank you for sharing your passion and your knowledge. And you've invested a lot in just collecting your own knowledge and philosophy and generously sharing it with this community.
Oh, we're thrilled to be here. So Toby and I have a presentation. I'm just going to share the screen. Okay, and so we're going to tag team a little bit. I'm going to sort of get us started, and then Toby's going to jump in halfway through. Yeah, thrilled to be here. As Debra mentioned, I do speak out about this quite a bit on social media. You know, sometimes in like a positive way and sometimes in a, way, but that's okay. That's just the way I, as Toby reminds me all the time, dip your pitchfork in honey. And I'm like, wow, like a little bit of honey. I don't need a lot.
I just have to jump in here, Becky. Yeah. Before you came along, we thought Toby was the harsh one.
Well, yes, fair. Well, someone's,
now she can be the good cop and you can be the bad cop.
Yes. No, that's just sort of the way I am. Even my mother, when she reads my post, she's like, oh, it just sounds like you. I can just hear you saying this stuff. I'm like, yeah, well, okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, let's get going. So I'm going to start us off by talking about, sort of the definition of sustainability, because it's certainly a term you'll hear used a lot. You'll hear it used by people that are really trying hard to be sustainable and are following the sort of guiding principles and ideas. And you will also hear interesting spins on it by big organizations that want the world to think they are sustainable. So what does it really mean? Well, the definition that most of us sort of work with was something developed by the UN in 1987. And it was published in a report called the Brundtland Report. It's also a publication called Our Common Future. And they were looking at finding a way to sort of bring the world together to move forward into the future in a sustainable way. So sustainability and sustainable development is really about development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So that's sort of the starting point that we go from. But implicit in this definition and what people have come to understand is that it's sort of broken down into 3 things, and that is people, planet, and profit. So you'll often hear people, planet, profit sort of going around. It could also be interpreted as society, the environment, and the economy, because profit seems not quite the way I like to think about it. I sort of think of it as people, planet, and prosperity. Obviously, we all need to make a living, but, and we will. So when we look at that breaking down, so the people component of sustainability is really about sort of addressing health, wellness, tied into that as poverty and all those sorts of things. So it's sort of the people component of ensuring that we are healthy, that we are well, that we are looking after each other, and so on. The planet side of things is the sort of sustainability issue that most of us are most familiar with, right? So recycling, no plastics, chemical fertilizers, synthetic things, and so on, and responsible foraging, all of those sorts of things that come in to protecting the planet that we live on. And I think, as we all know, the planet is in a state of crisis for sure right now. I mean, that's sort of unquestionable. Global warming is a thing. And so we have to work on conservation. Prosperity is again, realizing that we all have bills to pay, that we all have lives to lead, and we need to make money while we're doing this in a way that sort of speaks to what our capabilities and aspirations are, right, as individuals. And then I like to throw in this sort of notion of societal resilience, which I think is an important thing for all of us to consider, and thinking about safe, robust, resilient societies and communities that we live in through public service and humanitarian action. So this may seem, unnecessary or extra information, but I think as we move through this next decade, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are going to be more and more on everyone's radar. Some of you may have heard about them or seen this graphic. My best guess is a bunch of you haven't, but they're an important thing to look at. They're meant to address, there's 17 goals that as a global community, we should be working towards addressing each of these issues. So I've broken them down a bit, and Toby's going to get more into this in her part of the presentation. But so how can we look at some of these sustainable development goals, the 17 of them, and how can we fit those in to our practices as florists, as flower farmers, as flower lovers, as floral sellers, all of those sorts of things. So I've chosen 10. We could do this for every one of them, for all 17, but I've started with just 10. The good health and well-being, flowers promote happiness. I think we all know that. There's a million studies out there to substantiate that claim. But we also have to look at safe working conditions and so on. Gender equality, we're in a female-dominated profession, there's no question, but largely in a lot of these, the big organizations, the men are still the CEOs. So, and we have a lot of issues in terms of women working in perhaps unsafe conditions or undesirable conditions in the field, right? Like in the actual flower field. So there's still gender equity and equality issues we need to address. Obviously water, huge issue right now. Greenhouse gas emissions, carbon footprints, responsible energy, green energy, all of those things come into play when we're talking about clean energy. So when we look at decent work, economic growth, we have to pay a living wage, don't offer unpaid internships, all these sorts of things, right? Looking at pricing, your markups, not undercutting the market, all of those sorts of things. Reduced inequalities. I think living through this last year, the fact that these inequalities exist in our world has become increasingly apparent. So we have to think about all of that as we move through our businesses. Recycling and composting, big issues. There's lots of places, I think especially in the US, where composting can be a real problem. If you live in New York City and you're running a flower shop, it can be hard to get all of that extra waste composted. And then climate action, choosing local flowers first, all the things that we believe in here at Slow Flowers. Looking at life below water, we're obviously thinking about the issues involved with floral foam and contamination in our oceans and rivers and waterways, and then our life on land. So to me, these sustainable development goals that the UN put out, we're really in this decade of action, because the idea is to have for as a global population for us to meet these goals by 2030. Well, that's soon, right? It's really soon. These goals were developed in 2015. And so to me, being involved in sustainability, working towards these things, we are all in it right now, and we have to be in it because we have 10 years to kind of get our you know what together, right? And so I think the fact that you're here, that you're listening to these things, that you want to make changes and think through all of it is really important. And as Debra mentioned, that's one of the main reasons I've gone back to school. So I'm working towards my master's degree in sustainability at Harvard. I chose it because it has low residency. I only have to go live in, not only, I'd love to live in Boston, but I have to go live there for a month, but not 2 years. So slowly working towards that. And I think I'll be the first person in the program that has looked at the flower industry, right? People are doing lots about on green energy and electric cars and all kinds of amazing things. But I was finding it really hard to affect change at the big level, like with companies like Smithers Oasis or something. So I thought, I'm going to go back, start with the very basics and move my way up. So I am like all in on all of this, and I know that you are too. And so we're going to move on to what you can do. And my sweet friend Toby's going to talk about that. I'm actually at my neighbor's house because my power is out because I'm getting our solar panels hooked up today. And so there's the odd person that's walking through this backyard. I'm like, who's that? And they're also probably wondering why I'm here, but it's all
Becky, thank you. That is so incredibly important to step back and take that macro perspective, because we get so wrapped up in our own little bubbles, but every action we take is, obviously impacting the planet. And that's pretty powerful. So thank you for just those simple graphics, but with a lot of meaning behind each one of them that we can all refer back to.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks. Okay, Toby.
Hi. We could spend an entire day or whole workshop taking that sustainable development goals and breaking it down. There are so many things that could go with each one of those that I think it could be, if anybody has spare time, you could take those and really line item all the things that you could do in your business that would pertain to each of those goals. But we are very close in time today, so we are just going to do some highlights here. So Becky put together this lovely slide to highlight some of the things that you can do, and we'll break them down a little bit more, but we'll start here with we've got some of the main offenders in our industry that are captured in this slide, like the bleached and dyed and preserved things. And then the next slide is the foam-free meadow installation that we made at Becky's workshop in 2019. We've got foam, and then this cool little science picture on the right is one of the ocean creatures, and that green line is its digestive tract. It's full of all the microparticles of the floral foam that it consumed. So that links into the please go foam free, because when those particles fly around and land in the water, this is what happens. Those creatures fill up on plastic and it does nothing for them, nothing positive. And then, looking at floral waste and then fair trade labor practices. So we're going to jump into some of those things down here. Yeah. So Beth, will you advance, or whoever's advancing, will you advance?
Do you see the screen that says people, Toby?
There it is. I guess my thing is slow. So okay. We're going to take the people, planet, profit concepts and break them down. And we are starting with people. So there's so many things you can do here. I think, like Beck was saying, this last couple years has really brought to forefront the amount of social inequity and injustice that there is in the world. So one thing you can do is stop and really think about what your diversity policy is and have it and make it known to your customers, but also you really have to live it too. So you can't just speak it. There's a lot of easy language that's put up, but then we have to also back that up with action. So those actions would be to include non-discriminatory hiring and serving practices. So let it be known that you take customers of, any race or gender, affiliation, that kind of thing. So make sure that you have an open and equitable service policy. You can also buy fair trade. So there are a few certifications in the floral industry, one of which is fair trade certified. And that means that, among other things, that means that the workers are probably getting a better shake of the profits and the treatments than maybe in other industries. So if you are, not necessarily shopping local, we can't always all do that. So if you are, having to buy like from a big box situation at your wholesaler, ask for them to source fair trade flowers for you. It's a small thing, but it can make a meaningful difference in someone's life. And also, make sure you're buying from farms that treat your people well or treat their employees well. And one thing is to ask for fair trade certified. Another thing that I did a while ago was I sat down with the owner of my wholesale house and I said, hey, you've been to a lot of these places because these big farms will fly their buyers in and give them tours. And, he said he's been able to see what different operations are like. And he has chosen to support some and not others because of the conditions that he sees and how people are treated. And so you can just do a little bit of homework and it can help you know a little bit more if you are putting money in the pockets of somebody that deserves it and shares it, or somebody who doesn't. So there's that for your buying practices. And then in your own business, make sure that you're providing a safe and fun and supportive working environment. And that can be from like an ergonomics perspective. It can be making sure you give your people breaks. It can be rotating chores so that somebody doesn't always get stuck with the junk work, and that people get to have fun and learn and be reinforced by doing, work of value. And then, let's learn from Becky and some of those social media influencers out there. Like, let's use our platforms to speak out for good. Flowers can be a vehicle for change. We all have the power to educate our clients and our coworkers and people in the industry by just speaking out. So education is really powerful. And, one thing that I personally have learned from COVID is how exhausted that this profession can make me. And that's just a basic thing right there. Don't run yourself ragged. Like, make sure that you are working in a sustainable pace for yourself and your workers. I think that's important. So these are all like weird, tiny highlights that are far flung, and each thing could be this whole huge, hour-long class. But those are some highlights. Yep. And then the planet is the one that gets the most attention. And I think that's where we all come to this. And hopefully, as we think about what we can do to be more environmentally correct with our work, we also then start to tune in. We all start to tune into the other aspects of like the profits and the people. So from a planetary perspective, for a variety of reasons, and not just because we're on the Slow Flowers Society meetup today, but buy local first. I think there's so much power in that, and I probably don't need to preach to this choir too much. But, it cuts down on the carbon footprint. It often cuts down on the packaging. It often cuts down on the working condition inequity stuff. You're investing in your own local economy. So I think that that's a really powerful thing we can do. But it's not practical for everyone. And I understand that there are different business models all across the world, and people need to make the changes they can make. To Kristen's comment, my sort of belief is that if everyone makes the changes they can make, it adds up to bigger impacts. And when you are choosing, if you can make a better than choice, maybe it's hard to know what's the ultimate good, and we can't always all be like this amazing altruistic business making 100% correct choices. But if we can just choose the better than, it will have a slow cumulative result, which is good. So if you are needing to not sourced locally, then look for those sustainability certifications. Look for fair trade. Look for Rainforest Alliance, which means that those products have fewer chemical inputs, wastewater is managed. There's a bunch of restrictions on habitat impact, so they can't just go blaze their way through, virgin lands and start terrible plantations of things. So some of those are really powerful, and you can affect good change by looking for those certifications. You can choose renewable or reusable mechanics. So if you go to my Sustainable Floral Design website, I have a bunch of blog posts on how to do things foam-free, and that's been a big bulk of my teaching. And we won't go into a ton of that today, but there are ways to work without foam, and it can be the materials you choose, it can be the mechanics that you choose. Leading into that next bullet point of salvage, compost, and recycle, it does mean that you need to pull those mechanics back out. So if you're choosing reusable mechanics, then you need to make sure that included in your pricing is a line item for deconstruction and like waste management after the event. So time for you to go back to the venue and to pick up all your stuff and to pick through and pick the tubes out and pick the eco-fresh wraps out and take things apart and clean them so you can reuse them for next time. And you can really cut down on your waste by doing something like that. But you do need to make sure that you have allowed for that economically in your proposal with your customers. And when I start explaining to people like what that charge is and why, and sort of my political beliefs behind it, I've not had clients argue with that. They're behind it 100% and they love it. So I think you can use your values and your politics as a selling point. And maybe that's how you know if you are at the right target customer or not. So avoid floral foam and other plastics and petrochemicals. And, foam isn't the only one. Like there's all the synthetic ribbons and there's the package, the wraps, and there's tapes. And, there's lots of things that we use that are waste products that have alternatives. So instead of tape, use jute twine. And instead of the, the satin ribbons, try a cotton or a silk or something that is compostable. And then don't use bleached, dyed, and preserved flowers, please. You can go to Little Farmhouse Flowers. She's got a couple great blog posts on those, the why to not use those things, but they are not a positive impact on the earth at all. Something that we don't go into, but is the farming aspect, and that there's so much horticulture plastic in the farming aspect. So, do what you can to grow organically and not use chemicals, and try to use a soil blocker instead of little plastic pots. And there's so many options. And then forage responsibly. Make sure that you aren't taking everything from a small ecosystem. Make sure that you aren't transporting invasives from one area to another. Like, we need to really think through when we forage what the responsibilities are to that ecosystem. And then, huge big picture, consider green power. See if you can power your cooler with solar panels, or see if you can invest in an electric delivery vehicle. Those are bigger and harder things, but they're great development goals. So I think the prosperity piece is the one that can make all the rest of this happen. And when, especially with big businesses, when they see that sustainability can still be economically viable, that's when we are going to see change actually happen. And so you need to make sure in your business that you are providing for prosperity for yourself so that you can continue to strive for greater good. So charge your worth. So pricing is a huge deal. I think we have Allison Ellis maybe joining us today. She's got a good course in that. And then I have, we'll see some resources, but I've done some speaking on that in a couple places where there's some free resources. And if you email me, I'm happy to send you a little write-up on how I price, but it's very important that you get your pricing correct so that you are able to continue, so that you are able to pay a living wage to your employees, and that you're able to pay a fair price for your flowers. That's all important. And then other small tips and tricks for becoming solvent would be to consider what items you sell a lot in the course of your events. And maybe you want to have a rental inventory. So it's an arbor or candle holders or things like that. I have made a lot of money over the years from the arbor that I purchased in the first year of my business that I probably rent, 15 times a summer, and for 10 years, and I rented at $300 a pop, and that's what I paid for it. I mean, that arbor has been a good little moneymaker for me, and as with all my candle holders. So things like that can be a good way to sort of build in a little bit of a profit line. This could also go in with the people category, but don't offer unpaid internships. Value the work of people, and sometimes trading learning isn't the only compensation someone should get. We all need to be paid fairly for our work. And the informed markup practices goes kind of back to the charge your worth. Understand how your market works and what's a good fair going rate, and work to make yourself have it be worthwhile that you're still in business, and don't undercut other people. When we race to compete on pricing, it's just a race to the bottom. So when you undercut, you bring the whole industry down, and it's a struggle enough, I think. Probably all of us can relate that we've run into people who don't understand the value of flowers. And so when we undercut each other, we are just supporting that message that flowers aren't really that valuable and people shouldn't have to pay a fair price for them. So definitely get an idea of what is, competitive in your market and be in there with them. And then, become an active member of a floral community near you. Maybe it's Slow Flowers, maybe you've got some grower groups near you or other florist groups, but it's really helpful, I think, and it has lifted me up a lot in my life to engage in the floral community. You learn a lot. You enhance your own experience. It's a positive feeling, and I think you can get a lot of support from some of these communities, and that I think is important in your feeling of prosperity. That is sort of the nutshell of our little presentation here, and it's just the tiny babyest snowflake of a tip of these big, huge icebergs that are underneath. But like I said, so for some resources, I have a lot of information on my Sustainable Floral Design blog posts on the crazy, weird ways. They're totally not very polished, but they're out there on ways you can design without foam. And then there's the episode 56 of the Sustainable Flowers podcast, which is a rad podcast. You should listen to it if you don't, but that's the one where we talked about pricing. And then of course, tune into Becky on Instagram for her Sustainable Sundays, which are great. There are many questions I know that you have, and oh yes, here are some more awesome resources. So I don't know if you folks are all loaded up in questions. If we have many, we can dive in, or if we need a little warm-up session, Karen, I can speak to some of the questions that Debra sent ahead of time. How do you want to work this, ladies?
Hey, I'm jumping in here. First of all, thank you both. That was just amazing. And we'll leave this on the screen for a few more minutes, but people will be able to get a copy of all of the resources when we post the replay of this video next week. And we'll make sure that we send it out in our main newsletter as well. So thank you very, very much. I love those photos of you guys on the questions.
Those are great.
Yeah, I think that we have about at least 10 minutes. And I'd like you to address the questions that I did email you ahead of time if they seem relevant. And then I'd love to see faces of our participants. So if someone wants to go on the live mic and ask a question, just raise your hand, and which is the little Karen, where is that? Is that like in the chat box or something? How do you let people know you want to talk?
At the bottom of your screen, you'll see reactions. If you're on a mobile device, it looks a little bit different, but you'll see reactions.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You can do something there.
The little smiley face with a plus, and you can put a thumbs up if you want to jump in. Why don't we do that, Becky and Toby? Address some of the questions that I had forwarded you from a new member, and then we'll let people jump in and wave their hands if they want to ask a question. I'd love to get a little bit more of a dialogue going on.
Beck, do you want me to start with the compost question?
Yes, please. I don't have the questions in front of me, so.
I don't have the questions in front of me either, but I remembered what they were.
Okay.
A common question that I get asked is about composting floral debris. And so I will tell you that it is much better to compost your floral debris than it is to put it in the landfill, because floral debris anything organic in a landfill can't be composed because landfills are anaerobic. They're not aerobic. And true composting needs an aerobic environment. So whenever possible, it is better to compost than to dump. And for some of us, that can mean industrial composting. So you take it to the curb or you hire a dumpster or whatever. And for some of us, that can mean backyard composting. So one then question that gets asked is, well, what about the chemicals and stuff that are on flowers, and is that safe to put in my compost? So there's a bit of a two-prong answer with that. So I have done a bit of research into this, and it's moderately complicated because science. But in general, the creatures of the earth that do composting are magical beasts. And they're marvelous things, all of those microbes and worms and that kind of thing. And I would say it's always better to put stuff in the compost, even if it's, random rose debris from Ecuador and who knows what's on there, than not. But you may want to separate a compost that is for like your ornamental beds versus your veggie beds. But in general, they've done studies where they put, they haven't done anything with floral debris, but they did a lot of like heavy metals and, toxic waste sites where they would grow plants that would take up the nastiness. They did like an assay of the chemical components in the plants. And yes, sure enough, they were loaded with toxins. They would then put them in a compost it down, and then they were on the compost to look for those compounds, and they have magically disappeared. And so the creatures of the soil have helped to break down most of our pesticides and chemicals are organophosphates. And so the creatures of the soil and the composting cycle have broken them down, and it's amazing. So that is kind of maybe a rough and bumpy answer, but compost is better than not. But if you're goosey, put it on your ornamentals, maybe not on your veggies, but composting is the way. And composting is not the same as biodegrading. Biodegrading is a buzzword that does not have measurable standards. And so when certain companies might say that a product is biodegradable, it's just a bunch of greenwashing, hogwash. And what we really need them to be able to say and conform to is that it's 100% compostable, which means that things are broken down all the way into their original organic chemical makeups versus just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but still being the toxic compounds that they are.
Yeah, if something starts out as plastic, even if it says it's biodegradable, it's breaking down into tiny, tiny plastic. Because it started out as plastic, so it finishes as plastic. It doesn't finish as humic acid in compost.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
That's great.
And so that's where the whole biodegradable versus compostable thing, and saying something is biodegradable, like, don't believe the hype. It's just a bunch of BS. So,
true.
Anyway.
Hey, I didn't mean to cut you off. Jennifer McClendon of Jenna Flora is here with a question. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you both for being presenters today. I'm Jenna Flora from Sonoma County. I'm a small rose farmer and florist. And my question for you three is, I've been hearing a lot about the global flower shortage and what's going on with that, with COVID, with weather. And I was just wondering your thoughts on that in terms of sustainability and as an opportunity for us to highlight what we do, the local flowers, and just those three principles you talked about.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's funny because I've seen it spun different ways on Instagram and social media. But to me, because my understanding that certainly in South America, there's also some sort of ethical workplace issues that are sort of playing into some of this too. So yeah, I say highlight the crap out of local flowers right now, right? And how we can get it all right here, right? No, it's tricky because, yeah, like I said, I've read a whole pile of different things where, I've seen florists saying like, oh gosh, like the flower industry is struggling and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, but maybe not your farmers right near you. Why don't you just get your flowers from her or him right now, for God's sake, right? So yeah, I think there's tons to consider there. But I would say now more than ever, it highlights the importance of local, and that ultimately it's the most sustainable option, right?
Yeah, thanks. Toby, you have anything to add on that in terms of reflection?
I think it's an amazing story to weave your brand message into the solution for this crisis, right?
Yeah.
And it highlights why going local is so important, right? And the unsustainability of some of the types of floral chains that, supply chains. I mean, it's all supply chains everywhere. When they get to that scale, it doesn't take much to break them. And, I think that that's one thing that COVID has really exposed. And I think people will relate to it now more than ever because, we didn't have toilet paper for a long time. And we didn't have, flour for a long time. So they're going to understand. And I think that it's a marvelously ripe terrain for the seed of your, brand message right now. So sow it, baby, sow it.
Yeah. And I think also it so highlights how seasonality is sustainable, right? How it is unreasonable for us to expect a clematis or clematis, however you pronounce it, however you choose to pronounce it. Now, do you know what I mean? Like I'll get those in the summer, not now, right? And I don't get carnations ever here. So, there's lots of things. And I see florists often say like, oh my God, it's tulip season. And I'm like, it's January. It's not tulip season, not here, right? So I think that helps us really understand, wait a minute, what are we getting and from where and when, right? So
Jennifer, do you want to just comment on like, what are you feeling? Are you feeling panicky, or are you feeling like you can sell every stem that you grow of your beautiful roses?
Well, of course, with Mother's Day coming up, I think selling the roses will be not a challenge, but I think it's getting that message to the consumer, because I think in the floral industry, we've been hearing that we value sustainability and local, but I just equate this so much to the slow food movement. And how do we then people understand that you can't get a tomato, or just it's not going to taste as good in January? So that's what I see, just trickling down. And that's where, so that the couples who are getting married ask for local flowers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think people, like generally speaking, consumers have no sense of flower seasonality, right? Like they really don't. They're like, oh, I had no idea this was getting imported, right? So
yeah.
There's that piece.
I just want to share with everybody some exciting news, which we'll publish in about a week, and it's a research that Slow Flowers sponsored that will then be available to our members to use. And I'm just thinking, like in a blog post or something, Jennifer. We partner with the National Gardening Survey, which every year does an omnibus survey of over 2,000 households, asking consumers on attitudes and practices in gardening. They've never really asked questions about flowers before. They've asked what are your flower purchases, but only if you were a self-identified gardener. And I tried to work with them to say, non-gardeners buy flowers. So let's ask everybody. But then the finding that we sponsored was a question in response to how important is it to you that the flowers you buy are domestic or local? And the findings came out that this is a threshold. So we're going to have to ask this every year now, but 57% of people said it's very important or somewhat important that the flowers they buy are domestic. 58% said local. So it kind of blew their minds, the people at the National Gardening Bureau who did this research for us. And of course, I felt so nervous that the numbers were going to come back with a lot of ambiguity. And so it's a threshold. We need to increase those numbers, but at least to say almost 2/3 of consumers are even aware that they can ask for domestic flowers is amazing. Toby, go ahead.
And I think then when you ask that question, suddenly people are like, wait, where are flowers from? Like, we've never even thought about this. We didn't even know this was a thing to think about. And once people their light bulb goes on to this, I bet those numbers leap by tens up higher.
Yeah. And we're already talking about 2022 adding, how do you know how to find those flowers and source them in subsequent surveys? So anyway, I have the guys that did the research on the podcast in 2 weeks. So they haven't done their big reveal. And so this is a sneak peek. Listen, we have time for one more question. And Kirsten from Bloom Magic Weddings has been waiting patiently to jump in. Hi, Kirsten. Oh, let's take you off mute. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry. Wonderful to see everyone. I have long hair now. I was at the Sustainable Flowers conference in 2019, and it was just such a intense and shaping experience for me. I went home and spent months processing things and thinking about changes. My question for you guys, as you both go out in the world and do weddings, and I know that you both have a lot of very sustainable practices that your clients may or may not be aware of. My question is, like, how deep do you go into that? Or do you even discuss it with people that you're going to show up with a clamshell with the boutonnieres?
I do. So I'll tell my couples, in short, quick bites about everything I do. All of your flowers will be locally sourced. There will be no floral foam in any of your designs. And then I give them like a quick 2-sentence thing on what floral foam is, just so that they know, and then they can go tell all their friends. That there will be no bleached or dyed. So if they're asking for anything that's dried, I tell them why I'm not using that. And I say to them, your boutonnieres and corsages will show up in recycled clamshell containers, because I do not buy any plastics for my business. So I go through all of those things, and inevitably I get back, awesome, that's why we chose you, or great, super, whatever. Nobody says, really, I'd really like you to purchase a brand new clear plastic container for my effing boutonniere and tie it up with satin ribbon. Like, you know what I mean? They're like, yeah, I don't care what
it's because they're afraid of you, Becky.
I have a neighboring florist down the way that really prides herself on her boxing and her ribboning. Yes. And she has someone on her team that does calligraphy on the box for the different bouquets and the items and so forth. So I show up with my tray.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you like say to people, oh, by the way, this is how I wrap things and why, inevitably they'll say, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. Who needs that? Who needs all this extra stuff? So I think people get it, right? I've never had anyone say, oh, I wish you could wrap it nicer, because they're drinking their pre-wedding champagne and throwing the boutonniere on. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I wait and then I take the clamshell back so I can use it again.
That's great. I love it.
I arrive with things on a beautiful tray.
Yeah,
presented. So they don't even know about the packaging. It's not
Yeah.
even an issue. But in every case, like when I tell people why I do something that way, it adds value in their mind to the service I provide, because that means that they are having positive impact by the buying choice they've made. So there's that.
Totally.
Kirsten, do you have any more questions? I have two more I want to throw in unless you have something else to add.
I don't have any more questions. I would just say that if you're getting started with trying to make some of these better choices and putting them in your practice, do it.
Thank
Do
you.
it.
I love it.
I stand out and my calendar is booked out. And I think that part of it is because of the person that I've become.
That's great. I love it. So let's see. Karen just started a new hashtag, reusing is sexy. All right. Thank you, Kirsten. You can use that. Somebody asked, Kaifa mentioned farmers who are beginning to employ hydroponic growing. And is that being incorporated as part of the sustainability conference or conversation? I'm not quite sure enough to address that. Either of you run into this at all in terms of farmers that you've worked with?
I haven't. I don't know. I haven't looked into hydroponics at all. Have you, Toby?
I have super mixed not experiences. I have super mixed thoughts on hydroponics, and I've encountered it. You know, I have like 28 plus years in the horticulture industry, and usually hydroponics are a sort of highly contrived ecosystem that's indoors with lighting. And, you know, I think there's a reasonable argument for it in places where people don't have access to land, but it seems a little resource intense to me. Yeah, I have pretty mixed feelings about it. So,
yeah, I think it's pretty, we do have an article on the Slow Flowers Journal that Tom Precht from Grateful Gardeners wrote about his trials in hydroponic growing of flowers. So actually it's not hydroponic, it's aquaponics with fish.
Which is a little different.
Yeah, so it might be interesting to check that out. Just type in aquaponics at Slow Flowers Journal and you'll find that article. Okay, quickly, AgriWool, somebody address it, please.
Well, I think Toby and I are on the same page here. So for people that don't know, right? I'm pretty sure we are. AgriWool is made from basalt, right? From mined basalt, which is like a volcanic origin rock. And so it's not a renewable resource. There's lots of basalt, but it's not renewable. Once it's all gone, it's all gone. And what we have yet to figure out are mining in general is not great. It's leaves scars and scabs, right, on the earth. If you've ever seen where they're mining coal or mining whatever, it doesn't look good. Basalt is surface mined, but still, I think there's a lot of questions out there about how is it mined. I've read some articles about significant human health issues with basalt dust when it's being mined. So how are those people being monitored and treated? Are they being supplied with effective PPE? Like all of those things. So I think whenever I hear something comes out and it's like, oh my God, this is the solution, I'm like, I'll be the judge of that. Not me.
So have you been
I think we can't just trust it.
Right. Yet. And have either of you handled or dealt with the product?
I haven't.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did get a box to test, and I will say that, you know, I started my practice and I used foam for like 2 projects at the very beginning because I was consuming all this education where it's like, that's how you do it. So in the very beginning of my business, I did that. And then I thought, what is this stuff anyway? And so mostly I have never designed in a foam kind of mechanic. My style doesn't need that kind of mechanic. So when I then did my experiment with that mechanic, I thought like, you know, it doesn't. It
wasn't your aesthetic.
Not my aesthetic, not my jam. I still don't think you need it. Like for 10 years, I've been doing weddings with like events and installations and great customer satisfaction without that stuff of any type. So I really just don't really think you need it. And it is very heavy when it's wet, and it's quite stiff. So I had to kind of like pre-drill, if you will, some of the holes to get the stems to go in. And I did agri-wool and a water arrangement, and I didn't get any like increase in floral life or anything like that. So, you know,
Yeah.
I won't be ordering. So
Yeah.
Okay, but back to Becky's point, be the judge and do your own research and evaluation. Okay, we sadly are running out of time. I want to talk about some giveaways, but one final question, I guess. Becky, you've been addressing this with Debbie Middleman on a text. If you do find yourself with some boxes of the synthetic green plastic foam, we will not shame you. We will just give you some advice on how to dispose of it. And Becky, I think that many people have this issue. So
yeah. And people are like, oh, what do I do? And I'm like, well, you have to put it in the garbage. Like it has to go in the landfill. But
put it in a plastic bag.
Yes. Yeah. Bag it up and put it in the landfill. But
because as it gets transported through the waste chain, the King County waste people told me this, as it gets transported through the waste chain, all the dusty bits blow off and then it gets into our waterways. So do put it in a plastic bag and put it into the landfill.
Okay.
It sucks, but.
Okay. Or someone said you could give it to someone who is still not weaned themselves from using it, but I don't think that helps the greater objectivity of sustainable floristry.
Yes.
Thank you both.
I'm giving this to you, but you need to stop.
Oh my gosh. Thank you both so much. I just,
Thank you, Debra.
we're getting really, really positive comments in the chat. Karen has posted the video from last month in the chat if any of you missed it, but we will have this session to share very soon. It was remarkable. And I hope we can all return to in-person conversations at the Whidbey Flower Workshop or the Sustainable Flower Workshop at some point later in 2021 or in 2022. We have a couple, I'm not going to announce who won last month. Those are all posted, but we have a couple giveaways that we'll do the drawing early next week. First of all, I'm really excited to say that one lucky person will receive the first signed copy of Where We Bloom, our new book, which is at the printer right now, and features beautiful studio spaces of 37 Slow Flowers members in the US and Canada. So there's that. You can tell I'm excited. And isn't that cover beautiful? That is owned by Cynthia Zamaria in Toronto. And she is a designer who works under her own name, Cynthia Zamaria House and Flower. So we thank her for that gorgeous cover. And then we have, this is really exciting too, 2 sets of the brand new Slow Flowers pins. And I'm going to put them up here and hopefully they'll not be completely out of focus. Maybe they are. How's that? There's one. And this is the other one. And they are just been added to our mercantile store. And Jenny Diaz, our fabulous designer, created the pins and also the back cards. So we'll have 2 sets of those. And then we have 2 sets of Johnny's swag, which we've been giving away. And Karen, can you just remind me what's in that? Are you still on the call, Karen?
Of course, yeah. It's Johnny Seed's trucker hat as well as the seeding tool.
And I have something to add to it. Johnny's just sent me 100
nice
wicked large plant tags. Oh, there you go. Which you can use a Sharpie on. So I'm going to add a set of 10 to each of those packages, Karen, because I don't think I need 100 because I have a garden, not a farm. But they're really excellent for, they're wood and they'll be, last all season. So next month, I'm going to just quickly tell you what we're doing and then we'll say goodbye. On May 14th, I'm sorry, I was looking at my calendar. On Friday, May 14th, we are going to have another amazing meetup, and it will be all about peonies. And Beth Van Sant of Scenic Place Peonies, a longtime member of Slow Flowers. She's based in Homer, Alaska. She's going to talk about growing and cultivation of peonies, and it's going to be a beautiful presentation. And she's going to be joined by our florist demonstration, Brandon Scott McLean of East Hill Floristry. If any of you don't know Brandon, you need to follow him on Instagram. He's an amazing designer, and they're going to talk about peonies. One more thing. I'm getting a reminder and I totally forgot about it. We're going to continue this conversation on sustainable floristry with Becky and Toby on Earth Day on an Instagram Live. So if you're thinking about this conversation for the next few weeks and you have more questions, we'll be promoting that on Earth Day, which is the 22nd, and it'll be at noon Pacific time for 30 minutes or so. I'm not quite sure how long we'll go. And Becky and Toby will be joining me, and we're going to just keep this conversation going. So feel free to shoot questions to them or to me, and we'll compile those. But more than that, join us. We really like that. I thank you all for joining us today. This has been just a great session. And thanks to our two presenters, Toby Nelson, Becky Fiesby, the Becky and Toby show, the Toby and Becky show. They've just been really inspiring. And I'm grateful that you all joined us today. So thanks so much.